Hello and welcome to this Ranger 4 webcast. Today's webcast will be looking at optimizing DevOps, the trio of tools for change. The webcast will be brought to you by Helen Bill, Head of DevOps here at Ranger 4. If you have any questions, please enter them in the questions or chat feature and we'll answer them at the end. For now, I'll pass you over to Helen.
Thanks, Tej. As Tej said, I'm Helen Beale. I'm the Head of DevOps here at Range 4, and today's webcast is about optimizing DevOps, the trio of tools for change. So we've been working with organisations quite a few years now and been preaching the mantra people, process, tools. And what we mean by that is that when we start any kind of SDLC project, we want to start by looking at the organisation, making sure that the right people are in the right roles, doing the right things. Then we'll start looking at the process and start defining things like the requirements gathering process, the development process, looking at agile techniques, looking at defect and change management. And then finally, when we're happy that the processes are well defined and well documented, we can move on to implementing some tools that will support the processes. With the advent of DevOps around 5 years ago now, we've updated our adage slightly. So we now talk about culture, interactions, and automation, which reflects the fact that DevOps is first and foremost a cultural movement. So again, we need to get the cultural aspects of things right. So knowing that organizations are handling things like blame and failure correctly, that they're operating and arranging teams in an optimized manner, and then move on to interactions and ensuring that the collaboration and sharing of knowledge and skills is going on in the right manner before we can finally look at automation and moving towards a continuous delivery type environment. However, today we are talking about tools and automation, so we're going to focus in on that. If you do have any questions around culture or interactions and process, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to have a chat with you about the kind of things we do to help there. So this is our DevOps maturity model. We use this with organisations to understand where they are today and what their desired future state might look like. So if you look at level 4 of the DevOps maturity model, that's optimizing DevOps, you'll see that we start talking about tool chains and continuous delivery here. What we're really talking about is an environment where we can automatically deploy a new application or a new release at any time, so on demand. So a while back, we used to talk to organisations about increasing volume of releases from 4 a month to 4 a week. But actually what we're really aiming for is being able to deploy innovation whenever it's ready. Then what we need is an environment that can tell us when we're going to have a problem with production before it happens, and we know before anyone else tells us. So we don't want users or, God forbid, customers ringing us up and telling us the system is down. We want to know that system is going to come down, and we want to be able to instantly redeploy the last known working version of it seamlessly to the users. And then we also want that tool to be able to tell the developers where exactly in the code the problem was, so that when they receive the code back saying there's a problem, the system is not working properly, they also have the intelligence given to them about where that issue is, so they can very quickly fix it, automatically push it through an automated testing cycle, and deploy it instantly back into production when it's ready. So this is the software development lifecycle we've typically looked at. So you can see it's kind of 4 broad phases: plan, design, implement, and maintain. And on the left-hand side in the green, we've got the typical sort of tasks that development have done, and on the right, the operations piece. So this year, a couple of months ago, Puppet Labs released their 2014 State of DevOps report, and here they said that IT performance is measured in terms of throughput and stability, which they say are 2 opposing kind of attributes or characteristics, and that certainly reflects the provenance of DevOps as well. So when we talk to people about what DevOps is and why it's come about, we talk about how mission critical or strategic IT is now seen, how it is a business's competitive advantage in most cases now is ruled by what they can do on the internet and what software applications they can deliver to their users. So what that means in terms of how that manifests itself in the business is that developers are asked to produce more and more innovation all of the time. So they're under pressure to take new things to market. On the other side of the fence, we have infrastructures that have been built over several decades that are very, very complex, may include SOA, lots of integrations, maybe heterogeneous platforms, so multiple different types of web server, all very, very complex and hanging together in some cases by a bit of a thread, so often very fragile. So we have other teams of people that are very concerned about the stability of their systems and keeping them up. So we have innovation and throughput pushing through to fragility and stability. However, we need to get both of these things right if we're going to make IT work to its best of its advantage and make sure that our customers and the organisations that we work with can compete and survive and thrive in an increasingly competitive marketplace. So according to the State of DevOps report, the actual measures that make up IT performance are 3 of them. Firstly, deployment frequency. Secondly, the lead time for changes. And thirdly, the MTTR, or the mean time to repair or resolution. So if we drill down into these a bit more, this is also from the same report. So we'll start by looking at the first one, deployment frequency. And we've already touched on continuous delivery in this session, and this capability of taking innovation to market on demand. So deployment is a non-event. So in the past, we've seen organisations that have got a major new release of their application and everyone gets quite concerned about it, and maybe it's scheduled for a Saturday morning and everyone's on tenterhooks to see if it's going to work, and there's fingers crossed and it goes out, but there's problems with it and there's complete frenzy and everyone's working overtime to make this thing happen. We want to get away from that and deploy application and releases and updates all the time, confidently, knowing that it's not going to bring production down, and knowing that if it does bring production down, that we can do something about it very, very quickly. So this concept of smart failure. And a bit more on smart failure, actually, while I think about it for a moment. I mentioned failure and companies' attitudes towards failure earlier as a kind of DevOps thing. So when we're analysing cultures for DevOps attributes, one of the things we look for is this concept about feeling like you're dancing around the edge of failure, which might sound like a bad thing, but in the DevOps world, it's actually something that we look to try and create. So we're trying to create cultures where people are encouraged to have ideas and act on ideas and innovate and try new things, but within a safe environment. So knowing that if something goes wrong, there's a way out of it fast, but trying to do things to potentially trying to do things to break systems to make them stronger. So you've probably heard of Chaos Monkey or people doing Friday afternoon hacking of systems to try and break stuff. Failure is really important. Mention of version control here. This is a little bit repetitive. It's on each of these 3 things, but in this one, let's just talk quickly about testing and troubleshooting. So what we're looking for here is the ability to spin up complex test environments very quickly and cheaply so that we know we're testing the same as what's in production. Second piece, lead time for changes. I did mention the version control is going to get a bit repetitive. So here we're talking about this ability of knowing what version everything is and being able to deploy it very quickly. The important part for me of this slide is when we start talking about automated testing. So we alluded to it in the previous slide, this ability to spin up testing environments very fast, particularly integrated testing environments. So this is about confidence again, knowing that the code has been tested in a production-like environment so that when it hits production, it's not going to hit anything new that you haven't already anticipated. We want to avoid building integrations, and sometimes it's not just the cost of building the integrations in the test environment. Sometimes there's even payments that need to be made to third parties for the test integrations and things. And the third part of the report is around this MTTR, so the mean time to recover or repair or resolution, whichever R you prefer. They're all the same thing, how long it takes you to recover from an outage. And of course, our ultimate goal is to avoid outages entirely. But if we have them, we want to know that the information or the intelligence is going back to the developers so that they can make a fix very quickly. Again, the version control is mentioned there, and again, this concept of if production does go down or you know it's going to go down, that you can replace it very quickly by redeploying the last known working version or the last good state of your application. So back to the SDLC, or the software development lifecycle here. Those 3 bits are these red bits. So we're talking about testing, release and deploy, and APM. And you may be thinking, you keep on saying 3, but I can clearly see that there are 4 there. Basically, release and deploy we put together. So it's really testing, deployment, and APM. The easiest way I find to explain the difference between release and deploy, and I will use the term application release automation in a few moments in this presentation. That was a term that was originally coined by Gartner and is quite widely used in the industry now. And in fact, I think BMC, their Blade Logic product that does this, is actually called Blade Logic ARA. So it's quite widely used, even though it is talking about all of these pieces. So IBM, for example, have a product called Urban Code, and it has two pieces within it, U release or Urban Code release, and U deploy, that's Urban Code deploy, which do the different things. And what you're seeing here is an example of a runbook that one of my customers provided to me. So what you can see from cell 2 to 13 are the release tasks in the runbook, and then from 14 down to 22 you're seeing the deploy tasks. So the release tasks are the kind of physical things that need to go and be requested, so the grant privileged access, host access, validate the server sizing, fix server config issues. All of those things are part of the release process. And when we're getting into deployment, it's the kind of actual technical process of getting that piece of software out onto the server or the cloud, wherever you want it to run. So the concepts or the activities like install Webster application server, configure Apache, generate WAS plugins, all of that kind of stuff. So why are these three tools so important together? Hopefully we've kind of alluded or explained some of this already, but just to recap, when we're talking about our route to life, so we've got our development server, our test server, our quality assurance server, and our production server. That's our route to life. So that's where we take software from and we put it into production. So first thing we want to be able to do is this concept of on-demand deployment. So whenever development have got some new innovation, and the iterations of innovation should be becoming smaller and smaller for everybody. So we shouldn't be doing major updates and releases. We should be componentizing and composing applications at much smaller fragments and deploying it on demand through into production. And the on-demand the automated deployment tool should be able to ensure the consistency of all of these environments. So the environment in dev should look near as damn it as what's in production, so that when it gets into production, it doesn't behave differently because something is set up differently or configured in production. The next thing we want to be able to do is know that something is going wrong in production. So this idea of preemptive failure. So being told that system is having a problem, it's having a wobble, it's going to come down, and being able to, at that point, very quickly redeploy this last known working version. So we've taken that production instance out and put the last known one back, so we're up and running still. But now what we're going to do is we're going to send back the non-working production version back to development with the intelligence of where the problem is in the code, so that they can quickly fix it, push it through into automated testing where it can be tested in a production-like system and back into production. So let's drill down a little bit into each of these areas. So I mentioned application release automation as the term that we use for automated deployment interchangeably. So when we're talking about ARA, the first thing we're talking about is no more scripts. So typically where we see demand for this type of solution is an environment where people have been deploying lots of things and they started off doing it manually, and they've discovered that that's very time consuming and very tedious and quite erroneous as well. So kind of experiencing problems and inconsistencies in what they're doing. So what they've started to do is kind of one afternoon they've gone, oh, I could write a script for that. So they have written a script for that, and then another one and another one, until over time they've created what I like to call a script monster. So this huge bunch of scripts that are needed to deploy any kind of new release in this platform. There's a number of problems with this approach. One is that the scripts are prone to failure and very difficult to troubleshoot. Another is typically those scripts have been written by one person, and that one person becomes a hero because when there's an outage, they're the only person that can fix it. But in fact, they're a bit of a bottleneck. Some organisations that we talk to have taken their script monsters and they've tried to build stuff around it. So they've built things like maybe a graphical user interface, perhaps some security around roles access. Maybe they've done some integrations into some of their other tooling for build and configuration management or something. But they've still got the problem that underlying is the monster of scripts. So what we're really looking for in an ARA tool is something that is Java task driven. So there's very little risk of failure. You can drag and drop tasks like start Tomcat server, stop Tomcat server. It's very easy to give other people in the organization secured access and privileges to certain projects or certain platforms or certain applications where they can perform specific tasks. I've worked with some organizations who have outsourced their deployment function to an outsourced partner like an SI, and seen instances of where things like a 140-page Webster application server install manual exists, where somebody is given some code to deploy and they have to sit down and go through this manual and build the WAS server. As you can imagine, extremely time consuming, very risky, because that person obviously doesn't fully understand what they're doing if they're having to follow a manual. So what this type of organisation is always looking for is this concept of push button, so that somebody that's got a deployment ready can say, right, this application needs deploying to this template. So with one button they can push and it can deploy. And again, coming back to this concept of on-demand deployment, so being able to deploy whenever the code is ready, not when the server is ready. The server should be always ready. And we talked about instant redeploys, so if there's a problem, last known working version immediately. And this consistency of results, so having templated deployment scenarios so that you know it's going to work. So again, we get away from this very hectic, we've got a go live date, will it happen, will it work, will there be lots of pain? We want to get away from that and have the confidence that we can push the button, it'll deploy and it will work. And finally, the other big thing that we look for around here is around compliance. So many of the customers we work for or with are in the financial industry and are heavily regulated. I've been sat with my customers and they've shown me kind of lists of things that they're being asked to comply with by their auditing team. So things like segregation of duties, and they have to report back in a kind of traffic-like manner on green, amber, red, or where they are in terms of complying to these certain things. And a lot of them have shown me that they can hit amber, that is, that they can explain to the auditors the processes that they've got in place that mean that they're compliant, but they can't prove it. This type of tool means that you can prove to an auditor exactly how your system works. So you can say, we know that that person did this thing on that date at that time and it had this result. So it's very powerful for that kind of thing. I've even seen one customer asked by their auditors what a certain web page said on their website on a certain day several years previously, and using their application release automation tool, they were able to spin up an instance of that website on that particular day and actually show the auditors what it said. So when we're writing business cases with our customers, these are the kind of things that we think about around a DevOps project that's going to involve release or deployment automation. So the first bit is around productivity gains. So typically I work with customers to build a spreadsheet that says these are your applications, these are the components of your application, this is how long it's taking you at the moment to deploy each component. We'll have run a proof of technology, so we'll have an idea of what it looks like in the desired future state. And then we can start assigning the cost of that deployment, so start assigning resource costs to those hours that deployment's taking. Fairly solid business case, this one. It can be quite scary, particularly for the people that we were talking about earlier who own the deployment process from a scripting point of view, because they generally feel quite indispensable and very secure in their position, and they'll find this very threatening. So we need to do some DevOps cultural stuff with them to help them understand that actually it's going to be very profitable for their business to be able to do this. They're going to be able to do much more interesting tasks that will suit their talents much better, and the organisation they work for will be able to get innovation to market much faster and much more of it, have much happier customers, compete harder as well. So there's another element of the business case that we can write here, particularly if the application that we're talking about is a revenue generating application. So if we can take that revenue generating application to market a month earlier, we should know how much revenue it's expected to make in a month, and therefore there's a bit of business case there. And finally, a risk mitigation. So if you fail to comply, there is a chance that you will receive fines. There's also a good chance you're going to lose a load of customers, which means losing a load of revenue and profit. So I stumbled across this article earlier on today in US Today by Twitter, and it's a US Today article saying that 43% of companies experienced a data breach in the last year alone. It's a huge amount. Of course, not all of these data breaches are a result of an application failure or an application problem. Some could be as simple as somebody walking into a data center that's unauthorized, or someone ringing up and managing to elicit a password that they shouldn't have. But quite a few of them will be application related. And the consequence of these data breaches are huge from a compliance perspective and a customer satisfaction perspective. So moving on to the second pillar that we're talking about in our trio of tools for change, automated testing. As with ARA, what we're looking for here is being able to have more people in the organisation be able to do this task. So being able to build test plans and being able to do it very quickly. So we're looking again to remove scripts and make things more drag and drop, easier for everyone to drive an author. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is take away this requirement to build production-like environments with full integrations to all of the pieces that are there in live, because it's very, very time-consuming, difficult to do, and can be costly as well from the software licensing perspective. So with service virtualization, what we're doing is creating effectively stubs to these third-party environments to save that development time. The testing tool stacks that we like also will include functional performance testing and load testing as capabilities too. So organizations can do everything from one console. So, and finally, we've already talked about simulating the real system behavior. You know, that's about having the confidence that whatever you've done in test is actually going to be totally like in production. So as soon as it goes to production, there won't be a problem because it's fully tested in the same environment. And finally, again, audit trail for compliance, being able to tell your auditors that something was tested by this person on that date and it had a result is very important. So building the automated testing case, we talk first of all about shifting left with our customers. So that's testing earlier in the development cycle. So really getting away from the kind of waterfall methodology where you spend a bunch of time thinking about it and gathering requirements, a bunch of time designing it, a bunch of time developing it, and finally months down or even years sometimes down the line, out something pops for testing, and it's a huge testing job and it's really complicated and we don't fully understand all the interdependencies and no one ever leaves enough time for testing. But if we do it early on in an iterative and agile manner, what we'll find is that shifting left makes it a lot cheaper and easier to fix the defects, and it's hugely accelerated as well. It's much faster, which means it saves you time actually doing the work, but it also means that your innovation gets to market faster. So in the same way as with ARA, having revenue generating applications a month earlier, 2 months earlier into market is going to make you more money sooner. And again, we've talked about having this confidence at deployment time, knowing it's going to work, not having that scariness going on, and having really happy customers that are receiving lots of really groovy stuff and it's all working. That's what we want. So finally, the third part of our trio of tools for change around APM, or application performance management. What we're looking for here are tools that can analyze your business transactions so they understand end to end what's happening when someone is arriving at your application, all of the actions they're doing within your application, what's happening when they're leaving, whether they're submitting a form or a payment or a trade or whatever it is. So we need that, and then we need the ability to be able to know when there's an issue, where it is in the code. So a really intelligent tool that can look in the code, say, I can see an issue, it's causing a performance problem, it's probably going to cause an outage, alert somebody, tell development there's a problem, but tell them what the problem is as well so they can fix it very fast. And APM tools aren't just for operations people anymore, they're for the whole business. So having dashboards or a portal into your APM tool that you can change according to the user that's coming in, whether it's a developer or an operations person or your CEO. And this is where the ability to look at the business transactions part of the application really comes into its own. So what we should be able to see at this point, and if we've got this right, we shouldn't need any MTTR because we should never have an application outage or down. But if it does happen, what we should be able to tell is what that's actually costing the business. So each second that application is down, what is the revenue or profit impact on the business? And finally, what we need to be able to know is that not only can we check the application health, but we also know about the end user experience, both on mobile and on web. We also know what the underlying database is doing and the server technology itself, so we get a full view of every application piece in there. So when we're building business cases around APM, or application release automation, as I said, we're trying to avoid any MTTR, actually. We're trying to avoid any outages. So first of all, get a view of how many outages are going on now and what the associated cost of those outages are, both from a what it's taking in terms of resource fixing that problem, but also what it's costing the business to have that application down for that time. So that's our MTTR calculation. But if we can reduce MTTR to 0, obviously that's preferable. And then the other piece is about the user experience. So it's more difficult to put a hard dollar value on customer satisfaction. But I guess you can start doing things like we had an outage and we did have 40 customers online at that point, and since that we've only had 10, or there's different ways to calculate it, but the user experience needs to remain seamless to keep your reputation high and keep people coming back and using your applications, whether it's via the web or mobile or any other type of client that you may have been using. So we talked about fail smartly earlier, so trying new things and trying innovation, but knowing that you've got the systems that can tell you something's going to go wrong and you've got the ability to fix it really fast. So in summary, these are our 3 tools for change: the deployment automation piece, or ARA, test automation, and application performance management. So if you'd like to know any more about any of this, please do get in touch. Our website is range4.com, or you can email us at hello@range4.com. I think we've got a few moments for a few questions. So I'll see if we've got some from Tej.
Yeah, Helen, we've got one which says, where would you recommend starting with DevOps?
You disappeared at the end of that, but I think you said, where would you recommend starting with DevOps? So it's a very common question. We get answered by most of our customers, actually. So we always recommend that you start by baselining your current state. So we can help you do that. We help people by baselining both their cultural current state, as well as things like their organisational and process and tool state. So we will survey people to get a feel on what the culture looks like in terms of blame and failure and knowledge sharing and collaboration and all of those kind of DevOps things that we were talking about earlier. But we'll also look at some quite quantifiable metrics that can be more surprising than you think to get hold of, but things like the volume and frequency of release, the volume and frequency of defect, the time taken to release, or elapsed time to release, time taken to fix a defect, number of outages, MTTR. So lots of the metrics we've kind of touched on today when we've been talking about these tools. So we start by baselining. Now, we would do that, normally we would probably do that as part of a DevOps maturity assessment, and we can talk people through how that whole assessment works, but you basically end up with a roadmap of where you can go with DevOps. So you baseline your current state, you have a look at what your desired future state will look like, and then look at the bottlenecks that you currently have. So we talk about the theory of constraints, so process flow, and that any improvement not made a constraint or a bottleneck is an illusion. So we do quite a lot of work around that. We also have the DevOps Liftoff workshop, actually, I should mention as well, which is a free one-day workshop where we have 9 exercises that we complete with 4 to 12 people in a room, and we do all sorts of things in terms of we look at SCARF, the neuroscience we're working with on how to motivate people and therefore how to reward people and how to set goals. We do a whole session on setting smart goals. We do a whole session on reviewing the existing tool chain and what a future tool chain might look like. We write a business case. There's all sorts of exercises within that, which a lot of people find a really good place to kind of just kick off a DevOps initiative and get a bunch of people in the room and make sure everyone sort of is starting from the same place. Was there anything else?
Yeah, it says the webcast is called Optimizing DevOps, the trio of tools for change. If there was another tool, what would it be?
Okay, that's a very good question. So I would say for us right now, I think we'd be looking at some probably mobile development support. So it's a hugely active area in our customer environments, and very challenging with the rate of innovation in the mobile world. So all of the different manufacturers, all of the different devices, all of the different operating systems that are constantly being released. So it's very hard for mobile app developers to keep up with all of that. So we're doing quite a lot of work with mobile development platforms, which make that job a lot easier, and they handle a lot of the device and version differences on behalf of the developer, who only needs to then really worry about what his application it looks like and what it's doing, and makes that thing a whole lot easier for them. Anything else today?
No, that's it. Thank you, Helen, for the great presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation, and thank you for attending. And goodbye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye for now.